What is up, my fellow Dune fans? We are now within striking distance of Dune Part 2. We can finally go back to Arrakis and sink back into the story of Paul Atreides. And as you've probably seen, the premiere already happened, and critics have seen this thing, and the reviews are just pouring in, calling it jaw-dropping and the greatest movie ever. People are even comparing it to Empire Strikes Back, which is wild. And if you're familiar with my channel, you'll know that I'm a massive fan of Dune Part 1. I love the novel by Frank Herbert, and Dune Part 2 is my most anticipated movie of 2024. And so today felt like a great time to lay out my final predictions before heading into the movie and kind of start that conversation. So we're going to get into it, but first, smash like, as well as subscribe if you're new around here, because look, I can't sand walk. I might not be able to ride a sandworm, but I make some pretty good content, guys, so I don't know, maybe subscribe. But this last week has been absolutely insane, and in the midst of a lot of Avatar: The Last Airbender content, I'm very excited to talk a little bit about Dune because this movie just looks incredible, and everything that I'm hearing sounds absolutely fantastic. But just to catch you up to speed if you're not aware, Dune Part 2 is the follow-up to Dune, written and directed by Denis Villeneuve and starring Timothée Chalamet, Rebecca Ferguson, Javier Bardem, Zendaya, and a boatload of other amazing actors. It's honestly insane the talent that they brought together for this film. But we've all seen Dune Part 1, and now we're in the end game. Dune Part 2 is focusing on the second half of the novel by Frank Herbert, and things get pretty crazy. Like, if you're familiar with the second half of the book, it gets pretty wild. But there's also a lot of room for adaptation, and so that's my first prediction. It's that this movie is going to take the source material and amp it up to like 110%. Denis Villeneuve was actually quoted saying, "The first movie was more meditative and contemplative. We were following a young man discovering a new planet, a new culture. The second movie, it's more of an action film than the first part. It's more muscular." And just hearing him say that, I get the feeling that the tail end of this movie is just going to go so hard, man. And I'd imagine that we're going to see some of those visions that Paul had in the first chapter in this second chapter. You know, some of those come to fruition, like we saw in the first one with Chani. But, you know, there's that scene where Paul pictures himself in the battle against the Harkonnens as one of the Fremen, and his helmet kind of opens up and you see his face. Well, in the trailer, we see that, but it's replaced with Chani. So we're already getting this idea that he's having these visions, he's starting to see the future, and he's kind of starting to seek it out. And if those visions in the first part are any indication as to what things are going to look like that giant foot battle that was featured, I'm expecting a phenomenal film. Denis Villeneuve knows how to do it, and I'm so excited to see him and Greg Fraser, who's the DP, kind of tackle all of those action sequences. They're really going to be pushing the boundaries of technology and action, kind of blending the two in a way that we probably haven't seen before, you know what I mean? But my next prediction is pretty simple. I think that the villains are going to be freaking terrifying. And I think a lot of this speaks to the first movie and already seeing kind of artistically how Denis has set up this world. The Baron Harkonnen, looking at him as he stands up in the first movie, and he's so elongated and his body just keeps going, and it's just this weird, awkward species of a man. And there's also like the giant ant bug, like very, very creepy and alien-esque. And now we're bringing in some very, very key players from the book. We have Feyd Rautha, and I think that Austin Butler's performance as Feyd Rautha is going to be one of the most memorable things from this movie. I'm already seeing that in some of the reviews. Feyd is a bit of an iconic character, but looking at what they've done, Austin Butler just being straight up bald, and some of these gladiatorial scenes that are in black and white, filmed in IMAX, it's that type of stuff that's getting me really excited. And I know that there's been a lot of complaints about Austin Butler and his Elvis voice, and how in some of the other acting jobs that he's had, he's continued to use that Elvis voice, like Masters of the Air and stuff like that. But there's actually a clip going around of him battling Paul near the end of the movie, and you hear his voice, and I'll tell you right now, it doesn't sound anything like Elvis. It sounds creepy and weird. Apparently, he modeled his voice after Stellan Skarsgård's performance in the first movie, and so you have all these Harkonnens. They're very, very weird folks, and I'm just very, very much looking forward to that side of things. But then also on the other side of things, we're bringing in some new players. We have the Emperor coming in, Christopher Walken, and you don't want to talk to that guy in the wrong tone. You know what I mean? But seriously, you have him and Irulan, and they have such a political, strange component in this story. And so I'm interested to see how they kind of flesh out those characters, specifically Irulan, because I know I'm talking about villains here. Irulan isn't technically a villain, but I am curious to see how they play her character. She really doesn't have much dialogue at all in the novel, besides starting every single chapter with a reading from Paul Atreides or something like that. And so I'm curious to see that, but then also the relationship dynamic between her and her father, and see Christopher Walken playing that supreme power role. Like, it's just going to be very, very cool. And then besides that, you have Beast Raban, Dave Bautista back at it. I'm very excited to see a little bit of a clash between him and Gurney Halleck, Josh Brolin. I think it's setting up for the villains to be a bit of a hallmark from this movie that people take with them. Like, it's going to be a very, very memorable experience. But aside from that, I think my next prediction would just have to be that Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya are about to blow everybody out of the water, and honestly, in their personal lives, reach a brand new level of stardom that they haven't had before, which is crazy to think about. Both of them are on top of the world right now, but if you look at the trajectory of their careers, both of them are going like this, and this is going to be their Titanic. This is that moment where it's just going to blow things out of the sky. Like, obviously, this is just me saying this, and I know that they're already like super famous celebrities, but I'm very much looking forward to Timothée Chalamet's performance in this. He was so good as Paul in the first movie, but that first movie came at a time where people weren't really going back to the theaters yet. It was just kind of like a day-in streaming movie. A lot of people have seen it on their couch, and after seeing Wonka recently and seeing Timothée Chalamet on the big screen, seeing him back as Paul Atreides and what happens in the end of this book, the transition into Muad'Dib, I think that this performance has the chance to be something really special. Oftentimes I compare stuff like this to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. I grew up with those movies, and you never look at Elijah Wood, Sean Astin, Viggo Mortensen. You don't look at those people the same anymore. Obviously, they've went on to have very successful careers, and you can watch them in any other movie, and they're fantastic. But Elijah Wood will always be Frodo Baggins. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those iconic performances that cements itself in film history, and I'm very much looking forward to Zendaya and Timothée Chalamet in these roles. Apparently, Denis Villeneuve has really put their love story at the core of this film, and I think that's perfect and beautiful, those two coming together. And also, at a certain point, apparently the narrative kind of shifts, or narration or point of view, I mean. Apparently, at a certain point, it shifts kind of to Chani, and that would only make sense if you know what happens in the end of this book. And so I'm just really excited to see both of their performances. I think all of the actors throughout this film are fantastic, but these two young guns, it just reminds me a lot of like that Titanic moment, or just some of those iconic roles that have gone down in history. But aside from that and a zillion other things that I could talk for days about, I just think that my final prediction would be that this movie is going to make a boatload of money. I really think it's gonna. Audiences right now are clamoring for good film, and we saw that throughout this last summer. We had Oppenheimer, we had Barbie, Avatar: The Way of Water. Like, that was a franchise that James Cameron just created, and now it's a big IP because audiences love something different. And I think Dune is exactly that. There's a lot of the old nostalgic fans coming into this thing, but there's also a new audience. And when you have people like Chalamet and Zendaya leading this thing, it's bringing a whole different atmosphere to the theater. And so I think it's going to have legs. I think it's going to do well worldwide. And I think Denis Villeneuve is going to absolutely knock this movie out of the park, and it's going to need to be seen on the biggest screen possible. So yeah, guys, I don't know. After reading these reviews, I'm just kind of freaking out, man. Everybody's saying that this movie is so darn good. I cannot wait. I can't believe we have less than, like, I don't even know, 15, 14, 13 days. I forget how many days, but it's amazing that it's almost here. I can't freaking wait. I would, though, love to hear what you guys are thinking about this. Are you excited to see Dune Part 2? Please let me know any and all thoughts down in the comments. I love to hear from you guys, and I try to respond to every single comment that I get. Also, if you haven't already, smash like, subscribe if you're new here. You can follow me on X at Jones Vibes Only. I'd love to hear from you there. And also, don't forget to keep up the good vibes, guys. But bless the maker, Dune Part 2 is almost here. Muad'Dib. Muad'Dib.